Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Kara, and chances are if you're here, it's because you've recently learned a little bit about fresh milled flour, or you've started using it or want to learn about it. And if so, you're in the right place because my channel is dedicated to fresh milled flour. We do tips, we do tricks, we do recipes, bakes, all kinds of fun things, and I'm excited for 2024. And in today's video, I really want to cover a question that gets asked a lot. I have a free Facebook group. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description box below. I'll also put a link to my blog in the description box below, grainsinsmallplaces.net. That's where you can find all of my recipes, lots of tips and tricks, things like that. If you're interested in that Facebook group, we just get together, share our bakes, ask questions, all things fresh milled flour. So again, I'll put a link to that in the description box below. But one of the questions that gets asked multiple times a week, if not daily, is can I make all-purpose flour with fresh milled flour? So I'm going to cover that today. So let's get started. So first, to decide if we can make fresh milled flour into an all-purpose flour, I guess we have to get down to like what is all-purpose flour, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The name all-purpose means that it's basically been milled and made in a way that it's supposed to work in all recipes. It doesn't necessarily work perfectly in all recipes. There are better options, you know, for bread. You have bread flour, cake flour, pastry flours, and on and on. So there are better flours to use, but it's basically for the home baker that wants to make a little bit of everything and doesn't have to buy 10 different flours or have a whole bunch of things on their shelves, that they could just use all-purpose flour, and that would make pretty good or decent bakes for everything. So the answer to the question is, can you make all-purpose flour with fresh milled flour, is yes and no. So the reason I say yes and no is because yes, you can make what they would consider a fresh milled flour blend. Generally, it's 50% soft wheat and 50% hard wheat. And that gives you about the perfect midway blend. Is that going to be great for all recipes that call for fresh milled flour? No. That's where it comes into possibly yes, possibly no. Anytime you're working with fresh milled flour, you're going to have to potentially adjust the flour ratios and the flour amounts. So I also would say to you that a 50% soft wheat and a 50% hard wheat would not get enough gluten to create bread. So I've created this little fresh milled flour, all-purpose flour blend, I guess you could call it, and I like to use 1/3 soft wheat, 1/3 hard wheat, and 1/3 kamut. So if you've been watching me for a while, you know that I love kamut. It's often in a lot of my bakes. I just love the flavor, I love the color that it brings, and I think that it helps when I'm kneading with my hard whites, just the dough to come together much nicer. It's easier to work with. I just really like how it works. So if you haven't tried it yet, maybe grab a small bag of it, see if you like it. I'm guessing you will, but if not, oftentimes when I call for kamut, you can usually use spelt or einkorn in place of that if you prefer those, but they don't quite work the same way as kamut. So I just think that it helps give that little boost for, especially in breads, but I also like to use it in tortillas, my pizza doughs, focaccias, things, just all the things I usually put at least a little kamut in there. So back to the fresh milled flour, making all-purpose flour. So the blend I was talking about, which is 1/3 of each of those, is not something that's going to work for bread. So if you're wanting something for bread, I would recommend a higher level of your hard white. So generally with breads, I will use a hard wheat, and it will be like 75 to 80% hard wheat, and then I'll throw in the rest kamut. So those would be more of like your bread flours. And for my cake flours, I like to use soft white almost exclusively, and then I'll oftentimes put in cornstarch or potato starch, tapioca starch, one of those starches, whatever one you have on hand generally works pretty well. So if you'll see that in my chocolate cake recipe. I also, in my biscuit recipe, I just find that it helps make it nice and light, and it just ups the starch and the protein without adding extra bran and germ and stuff like that. So when you're buying all-purpose flour from the store, you're essentially getting the endosperm of the wheat berry. So when the wheat berry has 3 parts, we have the endosperm, the germ, and the bran. And when we mill it at home, we get all 3 of those parts. Well, the endosperm is the fluffy part of the flour that you generally are buying. It has the least amount of nutrients, if not basically any. Most of the nutrients are held in the germ, and then your fiber is held in your bran. So when they sift all of that out, we're losing all of those good, nutritious things that we want in our flour. So then they went and enriched it with a whole bunch of things that are synthetic, and there's no fiber from the bran at all. And oftentimes these flours that we're buying are also bleached so that they're bright white. So if you've seen any of my bakes, you'll notice that, yeah, they're not bright white like the white flours. They have a little bit of a darker tinge to them, and that's because we're using the whole wheat berry. We're using all the parts. So similar to your whole wheat flours, and people say, can I just use whole wheat flour? If you're using whole wheat flour, you're basically getting the white flour that's had everything stripped out of it and just a little bit of the bran thrown back in. So you're still not getting the germ, which is where, like I was saying, all of the good nutrients are in. So if you are new to using fresh milled flour and it bothers you to have the bran in your food, which it does take a little bit of getting used to if you've never had it before, or if you have children that are picky, or somebody that is sensitive to high fiber, it might be a good idea to start out with a little bit of sifting. And when I say sifting, I'm not saying that you're sifting all the good stuff out, because then you say, well, what's the point in milling my own flour if I'm going to sift all the good stuff out? What I'm talking about is if you use some kind of a wire mesh strainer. So this is like, if I wash my vegetables or my fruit or my pasta, whatever, this is pretty thick holes in here. It's not going to get everything out. It's just going to sift out the larger pieces that might be what bothers some people when they go to eat it. Generally, I don't notice the bran in my bread, but sometimes in my cookies, I will notice it, because cookies are made with a small amount of hydration. So the moisture level is very low. You usually only have butter and sugar and eggs as your wet ingredients. There's no anything to help absorb that bran. So I will grab a bowl and I will put this on top, and I will put my milled flour in here, and you just kind of just do this and you let that come through, and all of that flour now still has most of the bran and germ in there, but it's a really great way to start. In fact, my family did used to do this at the very beginning. We haven't done it in over a year, maybe 2, since we've done the sifting, because we thought that we needed to sift it so that it would taste good for cakes, pastries, cookies, all of the things. But I will say, all of my recipes call for unsifted flour. So generally you can do it by weight after you've sifted it, and then you will have the right amount of flour. But you can make good pastries, you can make pasta, you can make tortillas, you can make biscuits, you can make croissants. I have recipes for all of those with fresh milled flour not being sifted. So it can be done, but it does take a little practice and it takes a little getting used to. So that's just a nice tip for if you're getting started or you're baking something to share with a friend for the first time for them to try out, and gradually didn't just put less and less and less sifting in there, and then eventually you won't notice it at all and won't need to sift it all. But that sifted flour will also be more like an all-purpose flour. So all that to say, again, yes, you could make a all-purpose flour blend with half and half of the soft and hard. You can do red or the white wheat soft hard combination. Doesn't really matter in that sense. They work pretty similar to each other. Now the flavor profile will be different, of course. So give a try with that 50-50 blend, or if you want to get creative and try the new blend of the third of each with one of the recipes that you have at home that's not written for fresh milled flour. In the beginning, I do recommend that you find recipes written for fresh milled flour. You'll have a better success rate. It works a little bit differently, so it will just do a little bit better if you start with recipes written for that. Once you realize what the dough is supposed to look like, feel like, act, the moisture levels, all those, then you can start branching out and just converting all your recipes that you're used to making with fresh milled flour with no problems. But starting out to see how it reacts and how it works just really is helpful to start with recipes written for fresh milled flour. So, but I would love to find what you guys are finding out using half and half in a non-fresh milled flour recipe, so that I can get some feedback from you if this is working for your recipes or not. I do recommend weighing it rather than doing the cups, because if I scoop a cup of flour and I scoop another cup of flour, myself doing it, it may not even be the same amount of flour in each one, even though, you know, I leveled off at 1 cup. The weight might be different. When we mill our flour, especially, that, you know, it's lighter and airier. When you buy a pack of flour that's just been, you know, vibrated in a truck on the way to the store and sat on the shelves and everything's compressed, every time you scoop a cup of flour and level it off, it may not be exactly the same weight. So if you do it by weight, it's a little more accurate. It's a little tedious to get used to, but I think you'll find that in the end, after you do it for a while, it's very helpful. So I hope this info was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments below if you try this blend out, if you had success with it or not, what you made with it and not. I would love to know. Also, you can jump on my Facebook group and you can post a picture of whatever you made, whether it's good or bad. I mean, sometimes we'll share our flops on there and we can all have a little laugh together, and sometimes we'll share our, you know, beautiful bakes. So everything, it's open to all photos and questions and all of those things. So thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was really helpful, and thank you for stopping by Grains in Small Places. Goodbye. I just went blabbing.